To effectively harness the power of your mind, you need to first understand how the mind works. And to understand how the mind works, you need to understand its formation. Today, we are going to start a discussion on the power of your mind. And at the end of today's video, you should get to know how the mind works. My name is Grace, and this is Heart to Heart with G. On this channel, I share information that will inspire you to be and live your best life. I would like to welcome you specially to my channel. Please subscribe and turn on your notification bells so that you can stay informed when new videos are posted. Do not forget, please, to like, comment, and share. I believe someone out there needs this information. Okay? All right, moving straight into our discussion for today. I'm going to start with this story. So I read the story of a guy or a man who was sick, and his friends took him to the hospital, and he was diagnosed of malaria and typhoid. The doctors commenced treatment, and while they were treating him for malaria and typhoid, there were some other tests that were yet to come out, or yet to be ready to really ascertain what was really wrong with this young man. After about a week, his result came out, his HIV result came out, and the doctor announced to him, "Oh, we are sorry, you are HIV positive." And this young man lost it. From the moment he heard that news, his health started deteriorating drastically, up to the point that he could no longer talk, eat, or even move. He could not walk anymore. His body system was shutting down. And then everybody was concerned, and they wondered why his health deteriorated so rapidly like that. But after about 2 weeks, it was discovered that his results was, mixed up. There was a mix-up in the results, and the doctor came back and told him, "We are sorry," that gave him reasons and told him that they are sorry that his result was, the result he was giving was wrong, that he was HIV negative. This young man that could not talk, that his body system was shutting down and he could not walk, instantly on hearing this news, jumped up, to the amazement and wonder of everybody around. And people were thinking of what changed. His mind. Imagine thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm not gonna die again." And he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna live. Okay, so why am I here? There's nothing wrong with me after all, Which brings me to the big question that is always on our lips when it comes to the mind. People always ask, how does the mind work? We always want to know and understand how the activities of the mind affect our everyday lives. Now, in the course of our discussion today, I want you to go back to the story I read, and we are going to analyze it and see how the mind works. Remember, we are talking about the power of your mind. And I'm not going to bore us with all the psychological and scientific terminologies, no, because number one, I'm not even a science person, okay? Yeah. And I love keeping things simple. Simple is better, right? Yeah. So there are two things I will need us to know at the end of this video on how, or rather to help us understand how the mind works. Number one, our mind works with information. Now, this information that we receive can be influenced by so many factors, which might be our environment, what we hear, see, feel, taste, or what we believe or have seen happen around us. Okay. Now, the mind receives this information, processes it, and outputs it. Okay. It receives the information, processes it, and outputs the result, which is the outcome of what we see happening in our lives every day. What you think, what you say, what you allow to to stay in your mind when you hear it or see it affects what happens to you, consciously or unconsciously, whether you like it or not, because that is how the mind works. Secondly, the mind has two parts. The conscious mind, for the benefit of this, throughout this video, throughout our discussion on the power of the mind, we are going to be using the conscious and subconscious mind. Okay, now the mind has two parts: the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now the conscious mind feeds the subconscious. The conscious is where you make decisions, where you receive the decisions and process the decisions. The conscious is where you receive the information, process the information, make decisions, and accept what the unconscious is going to work on. There are different ways you can identify the conscious. Some people call it conscious, objective, physical, outer mind. While the subconscious, some people call it unconscious, subjective, spiritual, or the inner mind. However, generally, I call the mind the human powerhouse. By the time we finish with this series, you understand why I call the mind the human powerhouse. So I will admonish you or encourage you to click your notification bell so that you will not miss out on any of these episodes or series or sessions. Okay, all right. Now, going back to the story of this young man who, heard the news of his HIV positive status and everything went down south. He received an information. Now, I'll tell you some of the things that made him behave that way. Maybe he's living in an environment where people with HIV are being stigmatized, and he has seen people who have HIV that were not treated well, or that were treated in a bad way, or he has seen somebody that died because he had HIV. But there is an information before the information he received in the hospital. There has been something that his mind has received before and has kept it, and now it has come to play. It came to play when he got the information that he was HIV positive. He started thinking of all the things that will happen, the impossibility of him to live a good life or a healthy life, the impossibility of him to live a long life, that he has a short life. I'm sure he thought about all these things, and he kept thinking about them over and over and over, and there was no reason for him to live. There was no reason for him to fight. He didn't find any reason or any will to go further. That is what happens when we feed the mind with the wrong stuff. Every day we hear things, we see, feel, and embrace a lot of things. Our first point of contact, which is the outer mind or the conscious mind, is the input, where we impute those information. The part that receives that information is the conscious mind. Like I said before, this part of the mind is the one that receives and processes this information, then it sends it to the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind, all it does is to take this processed information, store it, and wait for execution. That is all it does. It will take the processed information and wait for the time to execute it. And when it's time it executes it, it does not have anything to do with the information received or whatever. But based on what we have been feeding ourselves, the subconscious, it will start playing out automatically until you go back and reset what you have already put into your mind. Okay, so all the subconscious mind does is to do what? Extract and deliver. It has no business with processing. Now let me bring it down to, okay, let me even use the story I told us. Okay, now this young man, he has always had this notion, let's assume he has always had this notion that if you're HIV positive, you'll be stigmatized, you won't live long, and maybe you die a painful death, or you are going to suffer a lot of things. And he was not ready to face that. And because it has already been stored in his mind, when he came in contact with the reality that he had this, He felt that was the end of the world for him. And that was what happened. The mind worked with it. That's the end of the world for you. And everything started shutting down. If he had a different understanding and that information was processed differently, his system would have not shut down. His limbs would have still been functioning. Okay, so these things happen to us. It can happen to you and I in different forms, in different ways. For instance, you're a business person, okay, and you woke up this morning feeling dejected because the past few days have been horrible. Maybe you didn't make a lot of sales, or maybe you failed an examination, or maybe all the things you've been trying to do, none have been working. You've applied to jobs in so many, you have applied for jobs in so many places and nothing is happening. Your past relationships have all been faulty, none have been good, and you just woke up in the morning thinking, my life has been a mess. That thought, if you say it that your life has been a mess, your mind picks it up and works with it. And you see that you never believe that your mind can be better because you are looking at the negative, and that is what your mind is storing. Your conscious picks it up, it goes ahead to process it depending on what you think, and gives it to the subconscious, and it starts playing out your everyday life. You see that you wake up, you take your CV, you are going to look for a job. It's as if nothing is happening. These things don't happen overnight. It might not happen overnight. It might happen over a period of time. It might take months, weeks, even years to actualize. But how they say how you make your bed, so you will lie on it. It applies to our mind too. Many of us don't know this thing, so we are not conscious of what we feed our minds. Now, since we know that the mind works based on what it receives and stores, we know that we can choose what we feed our mind and the things we are allowed to take root in our mind. Remember, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So whatever things are true, whatever things are honorable, whatever things are pure, lovely, excellent, positive, think on these things. There is a reason why this word was written. And the only way that we can be transformed as people, as a human being, as a person, is when we start renewing our mind. How do we renew our mind? Renew your mind by the things you put in it, by the things you say to yourself, by what you think about. Joyce Meyer said, think about your thoughts. Think on your thoughts. Think about what you think about. Many of the behaviors we exhibit and beliefs that we practice today were handed down to us without our consent. Maybe by way of upbringing, environment, society, and the rest of them, even religion. However, now we know that we can decide what we want our life to look like using the power of our mind. That means we will have to overhaul and revamp our minds. Change what does not work to what works to give us the results that we desire. There's a saying that madness is when you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You've done it your way over the years and nothing is happening. Why don't you make a shift? In other words, we are the decision makers. You and I are the ones that have been sending positive or negative vibes to ourselves. Whatever we see happening in our lives, it's us. We are responsible for it. I watched a YouTube video of a young man who was telling of his journey, how he moved from living on the street to buying a house that he lives in. He was living on the street without job, no shelter, nothing. But he had to talk to himself. He had to change something. And that was how his life changed. Now, there are many factors that can affect what we feed our minds, okay? But regardless, whatever it is, I want you to know that you make the decision. And whatever you allow sticks. When your mind gets in contact with the thoughts, it either stays or leaves. When it stays, the subconscious mind picks it up, keeps it, and executes it when required. So, my mom told me something once, some few years ago when she came to visit me. She said, "Oh, when you were younger, before you got married, you had always said you wanted this and you wanted this." And she came to my house and she saw that was the way I was living, and I had forgotten. Like, seriously, I had forgotten that I used to say those things out, like, to people, and they hear. Sometimes it's also good for you to say it out so that when people see certain things that are happening in your life, they know, oh, okay, really, these things are working. This thing is working. All right. So that happened. Now, having understood how the mind works, feed your mind with what you intend to see, and it will give you exactly that. Like we used to say, or we usually say, or it's usually said in the computer program, it says garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing with your mind. Garbage in, garbage out. What you intend to see, feed your mind with it. So be careful. And also, yeah, this is very important. I want to say this, it just crossed my mind. Be very careful what you feed your mind when you are not in your best place. When you are down, when you don't feel like this is it. Be careful what you feed your mind, because the subconscious mind is just like a robot. It can only do what you ask it to do. And being armed with this information, I want to ask, will you still allow things happen just like that? Just leave things to chance? Or will you start taking charge starting from now? It's up to you, but I will allow you to soak it in. Practice it. And don't forget to drop your comments. I want to see how things change for you. Until I see you again next week. Bye.